When I thought about doing this Black History program, I thought about all the famous people that everybody talk about. You know, you got your Martin Luther King, you have Harriet Tubman, and everybody. But this year I said I want to think about the communities and the people and where some of these historic people come from, like the Williams family here in the Hale Thought Barbuda area. Emeritus Speaker Adrian Jones came from this community. These are people that we should honor and look up to as well. And there may be some more in here. But I decided to title this event, Our Roots Run Deep. That's what I want. What does that mean? Having long-standing, firm, and secure origin, often referring to family, culture, organization with a rich history and strong, lasting foundation that are difficult to change. Our roots implies stability, deep-seated connection to a location, a community, and to your ancestors. The old African proverb is, when the roots are deep, there's no reason to fear the wind. So get on blowing Donald Trump. Because we ain't going nowhere. This proverb reminds us that life builds on strong value, resilience, and connection to our foundation, can withstand any challenge or adversity. A people without knowledge of their history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. That's Marcus Garvey. There are only two lasting bequests we can give our children. One of them is roots, and the other is in wings to fly. It's our roots that give us our identity. So remember, our roots run deep. And if your roots are deep, nobody can take that from you. So I decided that this is how I wanted this program to be. The first person that's going to be coming up to speak is going to be none other than a local. He was a principal or two at one of the schools. Also, were you the first African American to be the director of the Park and Recs?
I was.
Yes, and you know, and we all know the legacies of Emeritus Adrian Jones. She's done a lot. She's responsible for the Dix Johnson Museum being there. So we really look up to her. I respect her. Both the Williams family run deep in this community. So I'm gonna introduce you to Barry Williams.
Thank you, Betty. I want to thank you for allowing us to gather so we can remember, and especially during these times, and Sister Betty alluded to the person who occupies the White House, there is an attempt to erase our history. The best way for us to make sure that that does not happen is for us to know more about our history and tell others who follow behind us. Those are the important pieces. I learned how blessed I was as an adult to have been raised in a community that was intact. It had lots of values. I grew up in a community that if you did something down the street and the neighbor had the opportunity to discipline you and felt compelled to let your parents know what they had done, who further disciplined you later on. That's the community that we grew up, lots of values. We also grew up in a time when I started elementary school in the 50s. So I used to say that I went to integrated schools. I later learned that the correct term was legally desegregated schools. because I was the only African American in most of my classes. First, there was one other in the second grade, the only one in third, fourth, one other in the fifth grade, and just me in the sixth grade. That is not integration. That is legal desegregation. And as you can imagine, those of us who were among the first, we had many things that we had to encounter, such as, and I know my sister has shared that, in the first grade, part of the phys ed curriculum is square dancing, okay? All the children gather a partner, except for children of color, because children of color were not allowed to hold hands with their classmates. The children of color had to dance with the teacher. So I remember sharing that, well, I had the best partner, who was the best dancer, who was the teacher. That was my way of dealing with the kind of shame that I could not hold hands with my other classmates. A story that we like to share as part of the family, it became kind of a family lore. We grew up hearing about that nice man who helped Margaret. Now, Margaret was my father's oldest sister, and she was the first of my grandfather's children to go to school. There were four of them. Now, my grandfather was born in 1902. He grew up in Cowdensville, and you'll see some pictures of him over there. There was a picture with him. He was a Mason, and my grandmother was Eastern Star. So whereas they looked pretty large in that picture, when you look at them, they were actually very short people. I just wanted to, have a frame of reference, but powerful, powerful. My grandfather only went through the elementary school because that was all that was offered for children of color. There were no high schools in Baltimore County during the time he came through. My grandfather was a voracious reader and was largely self-taught. It was important for him that he wanted his children to have a high school education. So when Margaret came along, and in a school in Cowdensville, which is part of Arbutus, only went up to the seventh grade. Margaret was a good student and had done well. And so at that time, Baltimore County did not have a high school curriculum for African American children. You had to take a test, and if you passed the test, then you were allowed to go to schools in Baltimore City. Baltimore County had to pay the curriculum. The caveat that no one knew was it depended on how much money they wanted to spend that year for African American children. So they either raised or lowered the bar for that. Margaret, who was a very good student and had passed all of her marks, when she took the test, failed the test. Well, my grandfather, upon hearing that, and was told by Baltimore County, well, no, she cannot go because she failed the test, so we will not be able to pay her way to go to Baltimore City. My grandfather went behind them and enrolled her in Baltimore City. Baltimore City said, your grades are fine. We will enroll you. Now, the dilemma was the tuition. Baltimore County refused, and my grandfather, because either a lack of funds or his stubbornness, and he was determined that Baltimore County should pay for that. So she was there for a month as a student, and then she was unenrolled and put back in. She had to repeat the seventh grade again. She repeated the seventh grade, and again, she did very well. And at the end of the year, she took the test, and she did not pass the test. So again, the same thing. So my grandfather contacted the NAACP. A lawyer was assigned to the case. And what the lawyer said was, take her, and she had a friend, Lucille Scott, take them to Catonsville High School and enroll them. So they went to Catonsville High School. They, of course, rejected both of them because it was supposedly separate but equal. Separate, yes. Equal, no. The case became Williams versus Zimmerman. Zimmerman was the principal of Catonsville High School. Zimmerman said to my aunt, why do you want to go to school anyway? I mean, all you're going to do is just have babies. That was the thought, that there was no need for really education for children of color in Baltimore County because they were only going to become laborers or bear children or serve in some kind of servile way. The lawyer took the case on and went to court. When they went to court, they lost in the first time around. And then they took it to appeals. And in the appeals, they lost yet again. But Baltimore County paid for my aunt to go to St. Francis in the city. And that's where she got her education. And so later on, much later on, I was on the board for St. Francis as a touchstone to my aunt and the goodness of the good sisters there for educating my aunt. And that nice young man who helped my aunt, we later learned was Thurgood Marshall. So this was one of the first cases that Thurgood Marshall had when he went around the country challenging the separate but equal. He was not trying to integrate at that time. It was challenging the equality of education for children, and he did that around the country. This was a precursor to Brown versus the Board of Education. So this is one of those opportunities that we look back and reflect as a family and understand that we are a part of the history of this country as they have moved forward. And of that, I am most proud. Thank you.
So got a little bit of time, but I want to introduce you to the Diggs Johnson Museum board members. I apologize I didn't do that in the welcome speech. Richard Lee is the treasurer, so there he is. Pearl Kirby, our wonderful secretary, keep the notes and keep us straight. And our vice president, Vince Johnson, who's done a whole lot to help me get this program off the ground. And I know a lot of you have been talking to him. So Vince, Pearl, thank you. Now, the picture boards, Mr. Diggs, beautiful. She didn't grow under my heart, she grew in my heart. Janelle Diggs is Mr. Diggs' daughter-in-law. She is responsible for helping me get these picture boards and things up. And she tries to get out it. Mr. Diggs said, lots of more picture boards. So Janelle tries to get out to different communities and let everybody learn about it. Tell you a little bit about who Mr. Diggs is since we got this time. Do anybody know who Mr. Diggs is? Some people don't know the man, but what started him writing his books was the children. He was a teacher at Catonsville High School, and he said he gave the kids an assignment to go home and research your history and write about your family. And when they came back to school, they said, Mr. Diggs, we couldn't find any of our history on our family, where we came from, why we sitting here on Winters Lane. He said the white kids knew about their history. So they asked Mr. Diggs, would he help them? Mr. Diggs said, well, you know, I'm from the city. I'm not from the county. I just married a county girl. So he decided to take that on as a mission. Linwood Johnson was working for the county planner at that time, so he had done a lot of research on a lot of the African American communities. So he heard about Mr. Diggs writing his first book. It all started on Winters Lane. So they got together, and I'm sure they went in and out of different neighborhoods. Mr. Diggs said Richard was Richard suburb name, and he said they enjoyed talking to the communities, researching, collecting pictures, and that's what started these posters, especially Winters Lane over there, because you'll see in the back on one of the pop-up banners, I think it's 8 of his books on there. I'm not sure how many, but he wrote 13 books on 40 African American communities. And I think Mr. Diggs he was like the die-hard bunny. If you say history, he was there. And he did a wonderful job. I know today he's looking down on us saying, you know, I'm so glad that he got into the Hillthorpe Community Center and telling the people about what he's done and the community. So, you know, I met him when I was a nurse at Johns Hopkins, and I took care of him. I walked into his room, and there on the windowsill was the book. It all started on Winters Lane. He didn't want to get out of the bed because he had open heart surgery. So he said, well, I ain't walking in the hall. I said, you getting up out of that bed. So when I started asking him about that book on Winters Lane, he didn't even realize he was getting out of the bed, walking down the hall, telling all the nurses and doctors about Winters Lane. I didn't even know where Winters Lane was because I grew up in Calvert County. So Mr. Diggs is responsible. He put these picture boards together, and there's a lot more communities that he put together. So I'm just gonna, like I said, since I have this time, is any of my boards would like to say anything about this day? Richard, Pearl?
First of all, I just want to thank everybody for showing up today. It makes us feel good that we can continue the legacy that Mr. Diggs started so many years ago. Since I've been on the board, I've learned quite a bit about the history of the entire Baltimore County. And last year, one of the major events that we did was a bus tour of Western Baltimore County, where we saw 5 different communities. And as our president said earlier, we hope to continue that. And one of the things we want you to look forward to is our tour that will take place in the spring, when we will be going to the Hampton Mansion. And that's where many of our African Americans worked and lived. It's in the Towson area. When you come off the Beltway, you will see that area, and lots of people still don't know about it. So we want to encourage you to continue to support the Diggs Johnson Museum and continue to help us to spread the word about what has taken place and what will continue to take place in Baltimore County. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for we appreciate you. Okay, Richard?
I can just talk.
Okay. You got a
Thank
big
you.
voice.
My name is Richard Lee, and I guess my focus, this morning, is to recognize again the contribution of Adrian Jones. Maybe I should use this. I worked for Baltimore County for some 32 years, and for 10, 12 of those years, I worked with Adrian in the Office of Minority Affairs. I became involved with the historical communities Lewis came to the office one day, and he was talking to Adrian. They had discovered the Cherry Hill AUMP Church on Offord Road. They had found the last remaining member of the board of directors. She was concerned about the building, which was in a state of disrepair, and she was concerned that at some point it was going to be lost, the history was going to be lost. So Adrian asked me to meet with them. I'm a lawyer. I met with them. They told me what they wanted to do. I created a nonprofit entity, and then they began, we actually started looking around for money. We were lucky enough that Adrian was a member of the House of Delegates and was able to steer grants our way. So we began I guess initially we had to get money for the engineering, architectural part of it. Eventually, 2015, we completely renovated the church. And it's a beautiful building. If you had a chance to go out there, 2426 Offord Road. It was it was the second project. Our first project was the Cowdensville AME Church. Two of the women from, I think they lived in Adrian's block. One was a math teacher at Western. The other lady worked for Social Security. And they came to the office. The church was in a state of disrepair, and they wanted to get some funding to do some work on it. We were lucky enough that the planner at the time was a guy, can't think of his last name, but he was a British guy who had done some work in Israel on buildings. His long story short was he gave us $50,000 to do the architectural engineering work. And eventually we were able to, the two women put together a grant. They did it, I put together the nonprofit entity, but they wrote the grant and got the money for the work on Cowdensville. And it was actually a beautiful job. So again, Adrian was instrumental in getting all of us together, getting the funding. So part of what, I guess today, the Diggs Johnson Museum, part of our legacy involves the work that Adrian has done. And I just want to make sure we appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming out and supporting us. This is something since we talked about it, I've been looking forward to, because I think it's a good collaboration between the Diggs Johnson Museum and this community and this historic building. My wife and I have been part of this community for 50 years, a little bit over. We didn't know initially when we came into it how historic the setting is and also this building until after a few years. And once we did, I remember saying to Otis Collins, the president of our Civic League, I said, Otis, I think this building needs to get some kind of recognition. He said, don't worry about it, I got it. And that's when he contacted Mr. Lewis Diggs. Now, we hadn't talked, but that was my intention as well. And Mr. Diggs met us right in this building, and we sat at a table right about there, and he talked about what it would take to have this building be recognized by the state as historic. And he told us who to contact. And from there, that's where we went from there. But what I really enjoy is the fact that the families that are here are deeply rooted in the history of this community. And you can see it. It's all around you. So I'm excited. I'm really excited. This is like, we did a celebration for the building, and now we have a celebration of the community. And what we would like to do is keep that going and start having this kind of collaboration with the communities that have been researched by Mr. Diggs, and having people who are a part of that history do the actual speaking And that's what our intention is that history is a living experience. It's a lived experience. It's not a book experience. It's a lived experience, and it needs to be recognized and promoted. Thank you again for coming.
Ed Collin will be our next speaker.
All right. Just tell me when to talk. You might have to tell me to shut up. But you know, 80 years ago I walked up and down this road. So I've been around here a long time. Yeah, I lived here and in the city during time to go to school. And then as soon as school closed, I would come out here with my grandmother. Mrs. Edwards, she built the house up at 2011 Northeast Avenue. And I was raised in Halethorpe. So I claim Halethorpe. So over the years, I saw the gentlemen. And we had gentlemen back in those days who acted like men and were really gentlemen. And I learned a lot. And we had a lot of the African American men would have trucks. And several of them up and down Northeast Avenue. And then we had the peddlers over what we call over the hill. They had trucks and they had bulldozers. And these men were working men. And we had the Hawkins. And I remember Mr. Hawkins, he was some kind of, when you're young, you really don't know, but he traveled. And he was a person that tried to unionize the black workers. And my cousin, the Matthews, they built on Spencer Street, but that was late. But anyway, I know or knew, I guess I better say I knew, because out of a certain bunch, I'm the only one living. But anyway, I'll tell you a little something about myself, because I am a part of history, not the history of Halethorpe, but just the history of the African American men and what we did. Now, my career was in the fire department. I had several jobs before that. I'd been to Korea, came back home. My wife and I lived here. Then we lived up in Catonsville for a while, and then we bought a house, and it just moved on along. But when I went in the fire department, they didn't want us in there. So I found out that the fire department had boats. My father was Eastern Shoreman, so I'm familiar with boats, on, off of the bay, and just in general. But I don't want to make the story too long, but I got in the fire department, I found out they had boats. And I said, hey, how do I get in on a boat? And they smiled and said, you don't. Because it was called the Marine Division then. And I kept wanting to get on a boat, and it was always the excuse I couldn't get on a boat. And never tell you folks, I'm a Christian man, and I know what God can do. Of all the farmhouses in the city, the one I was in, at that time, I'd been in about 5 or 6 years, they had to detail a man to the fireboat. It just worked that way, some kind of way. I don't know how. But I tried to make that I didn't want to go, because if they had found out I wanted to go, they wouldn't let me go. But anyway, finagled around, and I got on the fireboat. Then in reading and understanding the rules, if you were there to fill a vacancy like I was, for 6 working weeks, which our working week was 6 days. And you could put in an application for it, and they couldn't turn you down. That's what I did. I put in an application to be on a fireboat. They didn't want me. The hairy, dirty job they had, they would give it to me. And I said, all right, I got some dues to pay. I'll do that. So I went through that era, and I paid my dues, and I started to read some books that they had down there on the Firebrook. And that old white captain told me, said, hey, don't sit here and read that book. You'll never be a father. And that time, one of their sayings were over my dead body. Well, they all dead. And I took all the tests. And tried this to be out too long, but it's such a lot. I had to be tested by the Coast Guard. Then I had to be tested by the fire department. And then they said, well, ain't no black person never had no master's license around here. Well, I said, let me go and give it a shot. Anyway, long story short, I went and gave it a shot. I came back with a license. Couldn't nobody believe it. How you get your license? They didn't use that terminology then, but like today, if a black man falls and say, you must be selling drugs. No, I sold no drugs. I just studied. And I can remember in our life, early marriage, when my wife would go to the market. Oh, we only had one car, and we parked the car, and I sit in the car and study. Well, every chance I get, I would study. And as time went by, we had a white officer, but he was Scandinavian. And he looked at me and said, do you really want this job? I said, yes, I do. So he began to work with me. And after a couple of years, he gave me what they call the credentials to go to Coast Guard. I went to the Coast Guard and gave them my credentials, and they looked at it, and then they looked at me. And then they looked at it, and then they looked at me. And they finally set me over in the corner, and I had a table all to myself, and they put these tests out there. Well, the white guys that had gone before me, they took the test and said, oh man, the test will be over in about a half a day. By lunchtime, you should be finished. Well, they gave me tests, and I kept passing tests. And they gave me some more tests, and I passed them. Well, what it was, they would take a test out of a package of maybe 4 tests or so, and if you pass a couple of those, they then move you to the next stage. Well, they did this back and forth, and every test they gave me, I passed it. Well, the first test, if you didn't make at least 90, you couldn't take the rest. So I don't know what it'd be on the other tests, but I passed them. And we stopped for lunch, and I went and got my lunch and came back. And when they came back to the little office, I was there waiting. I took the rest of the test, and the guy, he didn't know what to do, really, because I kept passing every part of the test that he would give me. So he said, well, I'll tell you what I do. He said, I can tell you've been studying. He said, and then navigation was one of the toughest subjects that they had. But he didn't know that I learned navigation. And I would have charts spread out on my dining room table, and my wife would know, hey, that stuff out there. Anyway, to make a long story short, the guy said, I'll give you one more test. And if you pass this one, you'll get your license. Okay. And lo and behold, God is so good. God told him they weren't giving navigation. Everybody don't pass that. Give him navigation. They gave me navigation. I aced it because navigation was my thing. So he looked at it and he looked at me. He could look at me and see that I knew that if he didn't give me my license, something was wrong. But anyway, he told his secretary back there, all right, print it up and give it to him. And she said, huh? He was an old white guy. Yeah, just print it up and give it to her. So it took me home there, took my fingerprints, and did all those kind of things, you know. And I finally got my license. It must have been about 3:30 in the evening, and I had a headache that would beat the bed. I mean, my head was just stuffing. But they tried everything they could not to give me my license, but I passed all the tests, so they gave me my license. I don't know whether they thought I would make a fuss afterwards or go see some officers or people or whatever. They gave me my license, and then that began the walk with the fire department. Nobody wanted me in the Marine Division. I got in the Marine Division. I got every dirty job in the Marine Division. The old saying, just go keep your nose clean, you'll be all right. And I did that, and every chance that time something came up, they would try to stick me with it, and every time they did, I came through. So they really didn't know what to do with me. They had to give me my license. So then back at the firehouse, the other test was for you to be promoted to what's called they got big for a second. Oh, when you get 90 years old, you're a little slow. But
Lieutenant?
yeah, thank you. And it just reminded me, because I had a little card that I had given them, that the job in the fire department was lieutenant pilot. And you had to get a captain's license as the Coast Guard before you could even take the test for lieutenant pilot, which I did, and I passed the test. So I got on the list. So when that happened, when somebody retired or died or whatever, it moved people up on the list. So I was on the list a couple of years, and will I talk too much?
Hey, were you the first lieutenant?
Yeah.
You tell him that. I think you have to end.
All right. I was the first African American to be a licensed pilot in the Baltimore City Fire Department, and nobody knew it because they hid me. They didn't want the people to know, that I was there. And if I had more time, I could tell you more about it. But I have to tell you about the one trip that nobody wanted. It was to take the fireboat one night up in the Susquehanna River because they had a mishap up there with the train derailing, and they couldn't do any work until they could get water or water supply in case they had a fire. Well, I took the boat up there. They said I couldn't. It's a 50-mile trip from the firehouse I was in up to the Susquehanna River in the area where they needed me. Took the boat up there that night. Maybe they was surprised to see me, or I made it, or whatever, I don't know. But anyway, I took the boat up there, and nobody ever said a word. Nothing. But generally speaking, with the white boys in the fire department, they get a cat out of the tree, be a picture in the paper. Oh, look, the tree got the cat, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I worked hard. I became history. I am history. I'm the first to be a pilot. I was the first to do the trip. There was a 50-mile trip, and safely. And I had a few other firsts. I used to instruct the people. They didn't want me to do that, but I did. But anyway, I got over. I thank God for helping me, because I know He did. And
okay. Good afternoon. So I'm Dawn Johnson. I'm Dawn Hawkins Johnson. I am, I guess, a child of many generations of Halethorpe, Maryland. I'm also the chair of the Halethorpe Colored School committee. So we are excited to have this event in this place. I would be remiss if I didn't say represented on these boards for Halethorpe are just a few families. So as I think about my childhood and growing up between Woodside Avenue and Spencer Street, where my grandparents resided, I remember this building being a number of things. It was where the Bridge Club would meet for, what was it called? It's a card game. Pinochle. I'm sorry. Have a little cold brain. Pinochle. There would be society meetings here, and I remember anytime there was something happening to anyone in the community, as I think about Spencer Street, I think about the Blackwells who are at the bottom of the street. I think about the Fields who were across from my grandma, about the Hendersons who were next to them. I think about the parents who were at the top of the street, Miss Davidson, Miss Rena Irwin, who was on Spencer Street, on Northeast Avenue. There were so many families that were extensions of our family who treated each other as family. So I'm an old soul, so when someone passes, it was ingrained in me to bring some food somewhere because that's what family did for one another in this community. And I seek to perpetuate that with my friends and my family. Growing up here, I remember coming to this building for summer camp that Miss Myrtle Winder ran in this building with May Perrin. I remember coming to this building, learning macrame, learning all the things, learning cooking skills, learning all the things, and sitting out where there was a tire swing in the tree that is no longer existent in the field to have a little fun and laugh and joke. And then I had to skirt through, and before there was a house that built a fence, there was a way to get from Spencer Street over to Woodside without having to go all the way around. And so it was a safe pass because everybody knew who you were, and they would call your mother if you didn't make it home on time. And so that's the community of Halethorpe that I remember and grew up in. And it's, I think we're missing several families on these boards. I love that Mr. Diggs and I had the chance to meet Mr. Diggs, and I remember these boards being displayed at different times in Baltimore County's history when they celebrated Black History Month more publicly. And I think, you know, we have to get some more boards because there's a lot more history about Halethorpe that isn't represented on these boards. It was a wonderfully safe place to live. I remember my girlfriends from college, when I brought them home, they were like, oh, you live in the country. But it was a safe country place that you felt like home and people made you feel like home. And I am just excited to see these boards and see the families represented on these boards. It was funny, I was looking at the boards and I was remarking because, you know, you get things from your family and you don't know what to do with them sometimes. Like, you get pictures and you're like, okay, what am I gonna do with this picture? Do I save this picture? What do I do with this picture? And you wanna respect what's happening. And then I looked at these pictures and realized these were the same pictures on these boards. And it was, when I pulled out the originals, I was remarked by the families, the pictures that I saved that are still on these boards. And I look at this picture and I see like community. And I think it's what we have to continue to preserve. And I have lots of pictures because I have generations of pictures that just flow in my direction, but would love to share them. And I'm sure each family that is in Halethorpe now, who remembers the teen center, who remembers the Halethorpe Civic League, who remembers Pinochle. There might be some still Pinochle players in here. Remember how much community and our history is important to us. I'm just thankful to have grown up here and thankful to continue to preserve the history of the Halethorpe community. Thank you.
You know what, when you were saying about your pictures, maybe we can come together and you can help us create a board of your pictures just by making copies, putting it together just like Mr. Diggs got, and then have it as a traveling exhibit, because you do have some wonderful pictures. And we forget, you know, when after a family member passed away and we start looking at pictures, and one thing the old folks used to not do sometimes is write on the back who they are. Who is this? I don't know. Who is that? I'm bad at that. And now I'm getting better at it. Because I got to, oh. And yeah, I look at it and I don't know who it is. Who it is, yeah. So there's less people to ask. That's why I titled this, Our Roots Run Deep. Through your communities, your church, schools, our roots run deep. So if you keep your roots watered, sure, a limb or a branch may be missing from time to time, but the roots are there. And someone said, we need to do this more often. I hear that now, that we have people out there trying to steal our history, but they can't steal what you already have. I mean, I don't even let him bother me. You know, stealing my history, whew, you got to be pretty good. So now the next person that's supposed to speak is Ireland Hawkins.
I live in Halethorpe and have lived here since I married Donald Hawkins in, I forget what year. Anyway, I'm going to talk about Relay, which is right by St. Denis. So Relay, St. Denis, sort of interchangeable. I grew up in Relay until I was 13 years old. And it's called Relay because it was at the point on the B&O Railroad where they changed horses between Baltimore City and the port of Ellicott Mills on the Patapsco River. The Williams family has been at 1724 Rolling Road since 1867, occupied by the same family since that time. They still occupy at home. Denise Williams is the only one that lives there permanently. Her sisters come down from New York, and her niece come down from New York occasionally to spend time in the home. The Joseph and Priscilla Williams had 13 children. Mary, Hester, Eliza, Martha, Catherine, Nellie, Ellen, who was deceased at birth, Joseph, Cornelius, Samuel, Nelson, Luther, and Jesse. They were the only black family in Relay until the 60s, I believe. We went to Banneker School. We had to really pressure the Board of Education to make Mr. Scribner bring the school bus to Relay because he didn't want to. So we had to walk to the white elementary school and wait on the corner in front of that school to catch the school bus to Catonsville. After Jesse and Priscilla died, the older children kept the family going by working and providing for each other. They worked for several prominent families who lived in Relay. Eventually, all of the siblings except Nellie and her niece Mary Elizabeth, which is my mother, and my father. The other siblings moved to their own homes. My parents had twins, me and my brother, and a daughter who died at birth during that time. Nellie's children, Sandy Carol, went to Banneker in Catonsville. Denise was too young, I think. First grade. She went to Banneker to the first grade, and then what they called integration and what somebody else called, I forget what they called it. So the school picked us up in front of the white school. And so we had to walk it was about a 15-minute walk, snow, ice, rain, to be picked up and taken to Catonsville. Of course, we were heckled and called names. The house was destroyed by an arsonist in 1980. It was rebuilt and is presently occupied by Denise and Sandy and Carol. That's it. Thank you.
Does anybody, yes,
Is this the same Williams family?
That's what the one reads.
I can provide some information. The number one last name that people coming out of enslavement took was the Williams. And there are a lot of people all over, African Americans all over the South and the Northeast who took the last name of Williams. And it actually started well before emancipation. There's actually a person who was enslaved on the Oval Plantation in Bowie, Maryland, who manumitted himself to fight in the War of 1812. And he took the last name of Williams when he put himself on the rolls. He fought at Fort McHenry in a great big battle of 1812. He then died in the hospital in Baltimore after getting an infection, living living with the rest of those soldiers. His owner, he was to have been given 100 acres because he signed up to fight for the United States. His owner actually unsuccessfully sued for that 100 acres because he thought it rightfully belonged to him because he owned William Williams. So when you hear the last name Williams, you should know that you have a story that goes between all of your families. You might not necessarily have DNA connections, but you might. I won't say it's an impossible, but it is the number one last name that was taken by people coming out of emancipation.
yeah. You know, there's a Williams, who his wife sold the slaves over there in Catonsville, where Mount Gilbo's church sits at. And there was a Williams over there. It may be he was a Quaker, I think he was, I don't know. So when you say that name, Williams, you know, it's not a common name.
Can you do me a favor? Can we have Carl stand up and tell everybody who he is?
My name is Irving Gaither.
Irving.
And I have connections to Halethorpe through the Brookses. So Mr. William Brooks's pictures back there is my great-grandmother's half-brother. But I have connections to the Hineses who were here. I have connections to the Brookses that were here. I have connections to Robinsons who own property here. I have connections to the Palers who own property here. I have connections to the Hawkinses who have property there. The Jacksons who have property in Linthicum, and their families moved here to the
the Caseys who lived here at some point. They were connected to my mother's family in what we call Queenstown in Severn, Maryland today. Casey's, yeah. Oh, Page as well. So there are some Pages who lived here. That my
Then you just
yeah. We call my cousin Dorothy, who lived in on East Preston Street in Baltimore. She was Dorothy Page. So we have a lot of connections, but as you said, our connections run deep, and they run so deep we don't even know what they are until we start doing a little bit of genealogy and things like that. So I thank you for allowing us to be here today and participate. Thank you.
We got a wonderful person here that I love dearly, and that's the pastor of Cowdensville Church. So could everybody give her a round of applause, please?
Good morning, everyone. My mother taught me sometimes when you have the opportunity to say thank you, you need to take that opportunity. So I stand as the pastor of Cowdensville AME Church, and when I say very proud pastor of Cowdensville AME Church, we are the benefactors of your work. We continue to work alongside of church members, not only to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, but make sure that 100 years from now, the building is still standing. And for that, we are grateful. I don't know why I'm out of breath, but sometimes you overlook the importance of history. And one of the things that we've been doing at Cowdensville is trying to recollect and rebuild records that were no longer available to us. So thank you, Sister Betty. Thank you, board, for all that you do, because it makes a difference to us. We are currently in the process of working through a grant, and we thank my forever House Speaker, Miss Adrienne Jones, the Honorable Adrienne Jones. You're my forever, absolutely, because absolutely, we understand and know the support that we received from her and her colleagues that supported her to allow us to get grants that will help us to concrete some of the foundation in the basement. And so as soon as the weather breaks, you will see construction going on at Cowdensville, because we want to make sure that we toe the line. It wasn't just your responsibility or the William Scott, Matthews, Brown, Fletcher family responsibility. Now it's our turn. It's our turn to do our part. And so we thank you for all that you do. We thank you for all that you have done. And we are just grateful. I think we have one living member left. Ms. Minoki was the last living member that attended Cowdensville on a regular basis. So we have a new generation of folks that have come in. We're up to about 15, 16 members, and we continue to build. So thank you.
Anybody else? We having such a good time. Why are we stopping down? You want to come down?
But I just want to say, I'd like to pay homage to my sister, May Burton. She lived, she lived at 2011 North 6th Avenue. And she was almost like the backbone of this neighborhood. She loved the children. She was good to the elderly. She'd run them anywhere you wanted to go. And she was always taking in somebody's children, and she always feed them. And whatever was needed in the neighborhood, she was right there and always doing it. Also, I'd like to pay homage to Miss Amy Brooks, Amy Hawkins, who was the same way. Whatever was needed in the neighborhood, Miss Amy was always there. And you could have been, they're gone now. We miss them a lot. But we just know that they did a lot for this community and they were wonderful people.
Also want to recognize the only living student left of the Halethorpe Colored School. If she would stand, I don't think she recognized herself.
Yes, I just wanted to say something as I'm sitting here listening to everybody make their remarks and saying things, but I know they don't probably have any pictures, but this building, when we were coming up, has such a rich history. We came here they had dances here, teen dances, they had the community always had something big going on in this building, and every time we came here with our aunt. My aunt was here all the time. And they had so much, I remember coming here like in the summertime, they had for like arts and crafts. We would love to come here and do things like that in the summer here. This building really had has a lot of history. And I grew up here. My grandmother's lived right down the street. I remember coming here all the time for so many activities. I wish they had pictures of the stuff that we used to do here, but they did a lot of great things.
Mr. Diggs must have known somewhere in his spirit, even with him gone, these pictures are still bringing people together. 28 days is not long enough for us to tell our history. 28 days is for us to tell them our history. They only give that to us so they find out what we're doing. And the rest of the year, we tell our history. So don't look at, like I've heard some of the students say, well, we only got 28 days. Why we need to worry about the rest of the year? I said, you're still living, aren't you? So history is a wonderful thing to have, like it says, a people without the knowledge of their history or their origin or their culture is like a tree without roots. So you have to remember, when you pass away, you ever hear people say, when Mr. Diggs used to say, when an old man dies, a library burns to the ground. We got to stop letting the library burn with the books. I had family members that called me up and said, Betty, I know you got pictures because can't nobody find pictures of Aunt so-and-so or this person. And it made me stop and think, my God, what are we doing with our pictures? What are we doing? Why are we not holding on to our own history? We got to start doing something different. We got to start doing something different.